Caleb Arredondo. I'm a concept artist in the game industry, and today I will be teaching you how I went from a beginner to a student to a professional artist making video games. And I will break down the process step by step on how to get there and show you how I got there. So first things first is what is a job, right? What is what we call a job? Now, a job essentially is, if we were to really think about it, right? Skill. Let's make this dark. Skill plus money equals job, right? And it could be a bunch of you could put job as in slash title, right? So associate, junior, senior, principal, lead, all that stuff. Job, whatever title they give you, right? So skill plus money equals that, right? What is we could go more philosophical and look what money means and what skill and all that stuff means. But just know that your skills as an artist and your the money that the company provides to you is what equals a job. Now, the higher the skill, the higher the money, the higher the job, right? Like the higher the title, right? And with each single one of those, they all have very specific tie-ins to one another, right? So a lot of companies, higher end companies that make millions or billions of dollars, they require more skill because they're going to increase your pay, and then your title may be the same, but it's relatively speaking on where they see you, right? So in for example, a a AAA will pay more than an indie studio because AAA has more money to pay more, but their skill requirements are a lot higher, right? A lot higher. So now that we know what a job is and what we need to do to, you know, get there, or what the definition of it, where we all see it, is what do I need to do to get one? Now, this is really important because I feel, being in the industry for about five years, give or take, there is a misconstrued understanding on what may or may not know why you get the job, right? Or may or may not know why you haven't got a job yet, right? Some people get a job and they're like, I don't even know why I got a job. I literally, I don't see myself that way, or it was by luck. It's not by luck. It's by the skills that you provide and where the team sees you, right? So for me, I'm a concept artist, and we're going to keep this entire theme around concept art, right? If you're an illustrator, if you're a VFX artist, if you're a tech artist, or whatever, some things still apply, but we're going to specifically keep this to concept art, okay? So, first, and the reason why I made this tree is we have B for beginner, I for intermediate, and A for advanced, right? Those are the three trios of skill level, right? And where it is in your journey, right? So for beginners, it's usually you have to worry about fundamentals like anatomy. Anatomy. You have to worry about fundamentals like perspective. You got to worry about form, values, and color. Right? So those are the fundamentals, relatively speaking. There's subsets, there's a bunch of other stuff, right? But those are the main things you really have to concern yourself about, right? And then we get into intermediate, right? So once you understand anatomy and all that stuff, and especially for a concept artist, in order to get a job, you have to understand design, right? Design goes not only for concept art, it also goes for other facets. Again, we're just going to keep it a concept art. But with design, you have composition, right? Composition, shape appeal, form language, and big, medium, small, right? Golden rule, right? I just added an extra one there. Don't think about that. Okay. So those 4 things you have to worry about: composition, shape appeal, form language, and big, medium, small. Right. So we'll do fundamentals, design, and then once you figure out design, then you get into the advanced, which is job, right? And what do you need for a job, right? It's 2 things. Portfolio, and networking skills, right? There's a bunch of other subfacets like being friendly, communication, stuff like that. But to break it down, networking, right? So, why do I bring this up? What is the point of this? This is the questions you need to ask when asking, what do I need to do to get a job, right? So first thing you need to identify is where you're at in this tree, right? So we have fundamentals. Let me change the color. We have design, and then we have job, right? So what I see a lot of students do, and this is why a lot of just even beginner artists or intermediate artists get really frustrated, is because they lack in a particular department that they should kind of already be proficient at. Like the skills that they know should be really like good, right? So for example, if you master fundamentals, you're like, oh, I'm so amazing at fundamentals. I know what I need to do. I'm going to apply for a job. And then you go apply for a job and they come back with you like, designs are boring, right? But you're like, my fundamentals are amazing. Well, this is a concept art job, not an illustration job. Like, your designs are boring. Like, we were looking for new ideas, right? But then you're like, okay, well, then I'll just get really good at design, right? Like, that sounds right. So what the designer does, or they skip the fundamentals and they get kind of good at fundamentals, and then they go straight to design and they hop right over, right? And what ends up happening is proportions and a list of, like, they'll list out like your anatomy and all that stuff, but we'll just say for the sake of it, proportions are wrong, right? Proportions are wrong. So at least with concept art, thankfully enough, if you're really good at design, you can relatively get away with that, right? Because as a concept artist, that's your job. Like, you're supposed to be good at design and coming up with new ideas. And if your company is very lenient enough, they'll look over the fundamental parts and they'll be like, okay, we can teach this guy fundamentals, or we could teach this guy, but he has to have the bare minimum of what we're looking for. Like, the problem that ends up happening is when somebody who gets like mediocre with fundamentals and good with design is that they pitch a cool idea, right? It's like, oh, let's do this crazy idea where it's a galactic spaceship where the pirates of that spaceship use this giant mechanical rod that fishes out galaxies, fishes out suns and galaxies, and the Milky Way is their ocean, right? That's like a really cool idea, and they're like, oh my god, that's so amazing, I'm so hyped for that. Draw it. And they're in their head, especially if the company has really high standards, is this really, really like Starship Troopers, like crazy spaceship design, mechanical, all this stuff. And then you post up like a triangle sketch and then like this, and they're like, what? Like, it sounded like a crazy idea, and you're just like, oh, that's what it does. And they're like, what? No, we got to solve for like 30 other things. I thought you know what you were doing. Like, and this doesn't even look like an actual spaceship. This looks like a Dorito chip or something like that, right? And so like your fundamentals are really showing, and they're like, whoa, like, right? But it's a cool idea, and they might look it over, depending on like if the company has patience for that. And mind you, if you're really good at design, companies tend to have a lot more patience, especially with concept artists on this end. Now, if you're, let's say, an illustrator, they don't care too much about design. They care about the fundamentals. They're like, oh, like just be really good at composition. Like we'll teach you compositions and cool like places to put the characters in the environments, or like how to compose like certain like illustration shots. We'll teach you that part, but like your fundamentals and like how you view everything has to be on point, right? Like they don't worry too much about design. So that's why as a concept artist, you lean more into the design aspect than the fundamentals, because design is very personal and very specific, that solves problems that only you can answer, right? So as a student and as like maybe a beginner, if you're wondering why you're not getting a job, it's because let me go a different color. It's you need to have these two in line. Make sure these two are at the same level. Maybe depending on where you're going, depending on what facet you're going, fundamentals might be more important if your job is more like illustrative and not, very design heavy, right? Because there's like fantasy projects that are more illustrative than design, but you don't want it that far. You want one is like above the other, right? Or it's the other way where you have your design, your designs are overtaking your fundamentals. But it can't be like, it really can't be this. It has, or if it's on the like more fantasy side, it can't be like this. Like if you do that, then this doesn't equal a job and this doesn't equal a job. Like you really want it in this happy medium spot, right? So now we get into the third topic, right? We get into how do I know if I'm qualified? And that's the advanced. That's where people who are more like, okay, I got these two things down, but I still can't land a job. It's like, I understand all of this. I'm like, I'm like really good or amazing and whatever, right? How do I know if I'm qualified? Okay, so that's where a portfolio comes in. A portfolio comes in to describe specifically what you know. It's a visual representation of what you show. That's why it's always like when you're doing art tests, it's very contradicting when a teacher's like, hey, or not a teacher, a client is like, hey, I need you to do an art test before you get on this project. It's because it's like, that's what the portfolio is for. You can see what I can do. A lot of the times, it's like some understanding, but still very contradicting. It's more of like, can you adapt styles, right? You have ideas in a specific direction we like, but can you adapt to our current pipeline and style, right? Because you don't have a portfolio a piece in there to really nail that down, but you have things we like, right? But anyways, how do I know if I'm qualified? In your portfolio, this is what I recommend. I've done this with my portfolio. I'll put my portfolio down below. You can see the examples. But in your portfolio, you need to understand as a concept artist, you are the stump, like the growth of the tree. You're the beginning part of the tree, right? The foundation of like the visual arts part. Like you have the game designer that's a little bit above you that pitches you an idea and you just visually show it. But the visual part is all you, right? So I will explain to you the process going down. So first we have a concept artist, right? We have a concept artist, and there's many different facets. There's the principle, there's all that stuff. We're just going to focus purely on concept, just as a general term. There's 3D, right? So as a 3D modeler, they design your thing in 3D. You have rigging, which is the skeleton of we'll just keep it to characters. We'll just say the skeleton of the character or the environment, whatever. We'll just say skeleton is the skeleton. And then you have animation. And then you have VFX. And then you have texture. Texture and light. I'll say texture and light as one. Light. And then there's like the marketing side, which is like then illustration. But, we'll get to that, right? So why is this important? Okay, so having all these shown on your portfolio, having all this shown on your portfolio is very important. Now, it doesn't mean you do 3D. You solve the problems of the departments. So, for example, first department is your department, which is concept, which is create ideas, which means ideations, multiple different things. Find the perfect idea. So then once the art director approves and gives a thumbs up, you then go to 3D, which 3D is orthographics. If you don't have orthographics, you're not helping anybody, because some 3D artists, they're like, I don't know what the back looks like. I don't know what you envision, and I want to keep it very consistent. So the more predictable and consistent your orthographic is, the more they're going to love you and be like, oh my God, I don't have to think. You're helping me out so much. I don't need to ask questions. I don't need to do anything. So the better your orthographics, the more you're helping out 3D. And that's super important. Rigging, with rigging, you, depending on the game, I'll explain later why rigging is on this list and why it's important. Because rigging, depending on the game you want to work on and what you're creating, sometimes they're like, hey, like, we can't have a cloak, right? So, like, for rigging, follow the laws of the game, right? So let's say you're making like a fan project for Overwatch, right? And a lot of the characters don't have, you know, like if you're making a skin for a character and it's like this character never wears cloaks and they're never designed to wear cloaks. Like let's say you're putting a giant like body length cloak on Tracer, the rigging team or the tech team is going to be like, hey, we're not going to design a skeleton for that cloak because Tracer never wears a cloak. So you're following the laws of the game, right? So just think of rigging like that. Rigging and like tech art. You're following the laws of the game. So animation, why is that important, right? Animation's basically showing, so those are what we call movement studies in concept, right? Movement studies. And that basically shows the animation like, oh, this is how the character acts, this is how the character is. The more like predictable your sketches are, again, everything, the more predictable they are, the more the team doesn't have to think and they can just have their own creative input on it, not like change the vision, right? So movement studies. Okay, so you have create idea, orthographic, follow the laws of the game, movement studies, VFX. This goes for visual effects. I mean, granted, that's what it stands for, but visual effects on object. So, for example, character has magic, show the breakdown of that magic. So the VFX artist can work. Whoop, sorry about that. The VFX artist can work within the scope and just be like, oh, I know exactly what we need to do. I know exactly how this works. I know exactly blah, 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 so on and so forth, right? And then texture and light is basically, and we can probably introduce this to illustration, but texture and light is if you're in a very specific game, right? Let's say a realistic game. This is where realistic games come in. If you're in like Overwatch, you really don't care about like texture and light all that, or you don't care about texture all that much. But if you're in a realistic game, texture is very important. Because like if you draw like a shirt and the shirt has a specific like what is it, like linen, is it cotton, is it, you know, silk, is it this, is that, you point in certain directions like this is what it is, right? So I'll put in brackets realistic game or movie or whatever, we'll just say game for the sake of conversation. Realistic game, show texture callouts, and make sure your thing's like textured to no ends, right? And then illustration, we'll branch to that at the last point, is marketing. So the more marketable your character is, the more they can envision like this character being on a poster, right? So how do you organize this, right? So we're gonna do another page. If anything, I'm just gonna lower the opacity of this one so I can have just like more of a clear understanding. So how are we gonna list this in terms of creating a portfolio, right? So first, we'll say illustration because again, marketing, right? So one, illustration. Illustrate your character. Market. Okay. Two, orthographics. Orthographic. Or we'll say 3D. 3D. And then ortho. 3, we're going to have VFX, right? So abilities, showcase, and then 4, we're going to have animation. This could be intertwined, VFX, animation. Movement studies, and then 5, texture, and then 6, concept, ideas. So you're like, wait a minute, like that doesn't make any sense. Why is it flipped? Like, why did you start from the top and then when you show it in your portfolio, it's flipped? Because when you think about it, when you play a video game, you're not seeing concept first. You're seeing the actual 3D model in its all in glory. And even then, you've only started playing the game because you saw the illustration marketing team first, right? So it's the same way you deal with your portfolio. Your illustration, the reason why you want it to be so good and pretty and all that stuff is because it gets people through the door. They're like, wow, this is so pretty. And then they go down and they see the orthographic. Now, everybody's going to be looking at your portfolio. Don't think it's just concept artists. Everybody's going to be looking at your portfolio, right? So you got the illustrator who's like, wow, this is such a beautiful piece. Like, I'm so envious. Like, I would love to like design, like illustrate this character in an environment or on a cover or something. Then the 3D artist sees and they're like, wow, this character is actually modelable and I can take this orthographic and blah, 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 and all that stuff. And then a VFX artist is going to see it like, wow, like I saw in the illustration that they had like a cool ability. Like it would be cool to know how that was broken down. And then they go down and they're like, whoa, the VFX is there. That's cool. That's how it's broken down. Let me try it, right? And then animation, same thing. They're like, whoa, like I wonder how this character would be inside a game. It would be cool to like animate it. And you show like movement studies, which is basically how they would react in game, right? And then, texture artists, they'll be like, wow, like the texture, depending if it's a realistic game, right? They'll be like, wow, the texture is like so amazing. Like the way they captured like silk is like tremendous. Like I would love to recreate that. And then you suffice that. And at the very bottom, concept, the ideas, how you got there. Your team, by the time they've seen all this hard work, when they get to concept, they're going to be like, whoa, like he did all of this and explored ideas and all this stuff. As a concept artist, you probably want to have like 2 to 3 pages of ideas. So let's say 2 to 3 pages. And they're like, wow, like he's a great, and what it's going to show for the concept team is he's a great decision maker because all of this is beautiful. And this is the ideation phase he took to get there. Right. And so that's how you break down a portfolio. If you want a complete portfolio project, this is the steps you need to take. Right. Now, that's one option. That is very much one option. So let me know. So that's one option. That's a whole thing. But you're like, wow, like this is going to take me a long time. And if this takes, granted, some people, they do all of this, and it takes them like what? Let's give a generous number, 3 months. And they do it so well. There are people guaranteed who only have one project on their website or whatever, and it's gotten them a job because they tick the boxes all here. They tick the boxes. They're like, yes, 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 yes. And they're at excellent quality. That's what you need to do. Now, there are other ways to do it. You're like, what if you want to do in volume? What if you don't want to do this entire process and work 3 months on just one project every single week? And you, sure. Like, you don't have to. But what you can do is illustrate that you can do things. You can do things at a more excellent level. For example, let's say you just, like a lot of people, what they do is they illustrate a character and like they just do a bunch of that. Just illustrate a character. But if you illustrate a character, let's say you illustrate for, let's say, 1 month, this character, and it's crazy. They're gonna be like, whoa, like that's one project, right? So you have one project. And so by the end of it, let's take all that and we say by the end of it, you have 6 projects done, each one of them done phenomenally, right? 6 projects done phenomenally. They will not question you. I would say, honestly, it's better to have 6 projects that do a bunch of things really well than just one project. But one project summarizes everything. So what I'd recommend is when you're doing your portfolio, you do this. Do this project first. This project is going to be like, holy cow, this is amazing. These projects, the 6 projects, are going to reinforce that you can do that really well. You get what I'm saying? So you always want to have more options at a higher quantity, right? Because if you just have the one, and let's say, because how algorithms work and all that stuff, your project's only going to be pushed for so long. So you need to keep up some relative, relative content coming out, right? Because if you do it every 3 months or every 6 months or whatever, like the person's going to be like, oh, wow, this guy takes a long time to do stuff. So having things like 1 month, and they're just bangers. They're just like, oh, it's so amazing. That's what's going to get you a job. And so the next step and the final step to all of this before we close this video out is networking. Now, networking, by the time you've reached by the end of it, networking is very important, right? Almost like the most important thing. Because what ends up happening a lot of the time, and I'll explain to you how this kind of works, is some level of like for example, ArtStation or portfolio websites is a source of networking, right? Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. It's a source of networking. Whether or not you're making friends, you're still networking. You're still putting your work out there. Somebody's looking at it going, wow, that person's amazing, right? So everything that I show here, I have done. And even up to the networking part. And honestly, the networking part to me, because I've done this before, is way more important. Because it allows you to get an in once you've done everything else correctly, right? So for example, I'll give you a great example. My art director, he was a teacher at a school, right? And I really love the project that we're working on. And I was like, wow, or they're working on. And I was like, oh, wow, I would really love to work on that project. So I took his class. I did really well in his class. And I asked him afterwards, I was like, hey, what are the steps that I need to do in order to get a job at, like, as a mid-level at your company? And he goes, all right, do this, this, and this. And what I mean by this, this, and this, everything I just said in the past, like, 20 to 30 minutes, right? Everything I've said. Literally, he was just like, do this, this, and this. Like this 3 month 3-month process right here. 3-month process right here. He said, do this, like this whole green circle thing. He's like, do that. He's like, do 3 of those, and we can see from there. Okay, sure. I did 1 of those, and then I kind of just like added some extra like filler content. I think I did 1 or 2 of those, right? And then I was like, you know what? I've done 2 of these already. Let me just apply. And he saw, and they saw in my work, like, oh wow, like he actually did what I said, and he's reliable, and he's like hell yeah, let's bring him in. And so I basically got a like, hey, like this guy shows like promise, let's give him an interview. And they gave me an interview, and I was just, of course, being myself, answering their questions, and they made me feel at home. And then they showed me the project, and by that, and then I just got the job, right? So that's the importance of networking, right? That's why it's so important, is I did those steps, and it's exactly what I showed you. It's exactly in this entire video, that's how you do it. And going forward, in this community that I'm building, I want to individually tackle every single one of those points, down to the beginner level stuff, down to this, even down to what skill means, what money means, what job title means, breaking it down. We're going to do anatomy, perspective, forms, value, color, and all that stuff, right? And so why is that important? Because down in the description below, I have a Discord. Let me draw the Discord little logo. I have a Discord, and all the things that there are going to be listed. And I'm going to be, helping you guys out, post work. I'll give you critique. Tell me your journey and what I can do to get you there. No extra cost. All you got to do is go down below. And if you'd like to subscribe, because this content will continue to come out and continue to grow and all that stuff. And not only that, Discord will allow you a networking service to talk to people within your skill level, or talk to people above your skill level, or maybe teach people below your skill level to rise them to the top, right? So Discord is down below, and I'd highly recommend, joining this community, right? So if you found value in all this, make sure to hit subscribe, like, helps me out a ton. This is my first video explaining exactly what this channel's values are going to be about. So going forward, just, join us on this journey. So that being said, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.